nice to be in here again. I've just worked it out. It was March when I last rung the bells, and it seems so long that I might have forgotten how to ring them.
You won't, Jennifer, it'll come back.
Is it like riding a bike?
Yeah. We hope, don't we, Christine?
I also apologise because I may just have a coughing fit because the smoke of the candles has just affected my throat. And
Oh, dear.
No,
Pull that one out,
it's
Jen.
quite all right, it's quite all right, I've got over that now. So what we have here today, I've called it a peep into the past because they are basically newspaper cuttings from 1802 to 1910. And because I worked in the newspaper office for so long, I had times...
You didn't work so long.
42 and a half years. No, it's only a wink, isn't it? So long anyway, that on bad days, on wintry days, I used to go down to the cellar and get some of the old newspapers that were stored there, the very old newspapers, and read them, and they were fascinating. So I did little photocopies of some of those stories, and I've collected them all together here. There's some curious ones, there's some sad ones, and there's some sort of adventurous ones, and there's one or two that relate to this church specifically. So I hope you enjoy them, and I hope not too many of you have already heard them. I think they portray the times between 1802 and 1910, when things were totally different from what they are today. But there again, they didn't have to suffer what we are going through at the moment. And every era has its own little markstone as we go along through the decades and the centuries. Nearly all the events that I'm going to tell you today are local events. And you may recognise some of the surnames, and you'll certainly recognise most of the place names. So I'm going to start with ways of earning a living in Victorian times. Now the first lady is Mary Hutchinson. These are actual people, by the way. I haven't made them up, they were in the local newspapers. Mary Hutchinson, she had a small shop in Market Street opposite the Waint, and she sold black puddings, treacle toffee, and on Ulverston fair days, she made gingerbread donkeys. And that was her way of making a living. Now we have Betty Ormondy, and she lived in Back Ellers, which is now renamed Neville Street, and she baked oat cakes for a living with the flour she bought from nearby Ellers Mill, which is currently called Fettle. You may know it at the bottom of the Ellers. And she hawked them around the town in a basket and sold them for so many for a penny, and that is how she earned her living. And then we have William Jones, nicknamed Sweet William. He was just the opposite actually, because he was a vendor of birch rods for the chastisement of children. Remember the old saying? Spare the rod and spoil the child. So we're starting in the year 1802 and then travelling through Queen Victoria's long reign and finishing in Edwardian times just over 100 years later. Now, I often wonder what it would be like for some of those corseted and stiff-collared Victorians if some were brought by a time machine and placed in the present time. What would they be most astounded by? Motor cars? No horses pulling them? Machines such as television? How did that come about, says Mr. Victorian. Telephones? Almost impossible, surely. How we've learnt through the decades to adjust to what happens in our time. Look at us now, all in masks and visors, yet we can all adjust and we can all work it out, hopefully. So let's see what they got up to. This is from the Lancaster Gazette of May 1802. Ran away from Cark Cotton Works. Robert Sinkinson, an articled servant to the Cark Company, about 35 years old, 5 feet 10 inches high, very thin, much pitted with the smallpox, small eyes. He was brought up in the Kendal area and ran away to Preston or Manchester. So he was a servant, or could I even call him a slave, in the cotton mill, and he decided to run away and see if he could make a living elsewhere. Here's another one, December 1804. Run away. Thomas Batty, fair complexion, tall and slender, short brown hair, about 19 years old, is used to weaving and jenny spinning. Also John Batty, fair and fresh looking, long, low and stout, with short brown hair, about 13 years old. Is used to weaving and winding. The above are sons of Thomas Batty, tailor of Burton in Lonsdale, and are apprenticed to Mr. T. Howson of Stainton, Kendal. So, how can we imagine that those two brothers, that things must have been so bad for them in their life, that they took hold of one another's arms and said, come on, we're going to go. We'll head for London or some other city and try and make a living on their own. These next two ones are slightly different, but it's the same theme. June 1808, strayed from her friends. Early in the morning on Monday, 30th of May, a lusty tall woman about 60 years of age, dressed in black when she left home, without a hat or bonnet, dark eyebrows and a swarthy complexion. Information as to where she can be found to Mr. John Rowlandson of Ashes, Staveley in Kendal. Her name is Hannah Rowlandson, but it is supposed she will avoid giving any account of herself. Once again, it makes you wonder what had gone wrong there. And the last one in this vein, June 1806, absconded. This is slightly different though. Thomas T. Bay, driver of the Ulverston and Whitehaven mail coach. He is 5 feet 6 inches high, about 30 years of age, and light complexion. He left the coach at Bootle and is supposed to have in his possession considerable property belonging to the proprietors. In other words, he's run off with a cash box, hasn't he? Whoever will give information of the said Thomas T. Bay, so that he may be apprehended, shall be handsomely rewarded by applying to the coach offices in Lancaster or Ulverston. Now we have a suspicious death. This is June 1804. You can form your own opinion. I know what I think, but you form your own opinions on this one. Suspicious death. A gentleman lately married his housekeeper, that he might leave her his property. In 4 days, she attended him to his grave. 2 weeks later, she was married to a cobbler with 7 children. So read into that whatever you think. December 1806, wife selling. On Wednesday last, a wretch in the shape of a man brought his wife with a halter around her neck to the Horseshoe Corner in Lancaster, being the place of public sale for livestock, and offered her to the highest bidder. The father of the poor woman bought her for the high price of 6pence, and loosing the halter from around her neck, took her home to the amusement of several hundred spectators. Next day, however, finding that his divorce was not legal, the husband went to the father-in-law and repurchased his wife for a shilling. These are all true, remember? April 1806. On the 28th of May, Mrs. D. Cameron of Ulverston was safely delivered of 2 girls and a boy, who, with their mother, are doing well. What is further remarkable is that the lady has produced 7 children at 3 births. So that's a busy household, isn't it? And it must have been something in the water as well around about that date, 1806 once again. Triplets. Get this, on Saturday, Sunday and Monday, so that's 3 days, the wife of Joseph Nicholson of Pennington, farmer, was delivered of 2 sons and a daughter, and they are all likely to do well. So that leads me on to the next one, which is September 1802, population explosion. Such is the increase in the population of the town of Ulverston that there is not a house to be let, though many persons have raised their rents more than 1/2. The demands for goods has of late been so great that the manufacturers could not supply them for want of hands. Several publicans around Ulverston were last week refused renewal of their licences on account of their having kept disorderly houses. So there we are. In August 1807, quite a sad incident. Killed by the Over Sands coach. As Edmund Winder, shoemaker, aged 88 years, was passing between the Lancaster Over Sands coach and a cart in Ulverston, the coach going at full speed, he unfortunately fell amongst the horse's feet, and then the wheels passed over his body. He survived only a few hours. A coroner's inquest was held, who found a verdict of manslaughter against John Hardy, driver of the said Over Sands coach. And then a month later, another little piece appears in the paper, and it reads, "Killed by the Over Sands coach. His Grace, the Duke of Buccleuch, Lord of the Manor of Ulverston, has most humanely directed the fine of £30 levied upon the proprietors of the Ulverston Over Sands coach to be paid to Jane Winder, aged 87 years, the widow of the late Edmund Winder of Ulverston, who was killed by the coach being driven furiously over him, for which offence the driver John Hardy is under confinement in Lancaster Castle for 12 months. So poor old Jane Winder received £30 from the Duke of Buccleuch, and let's hope that she could live out the life, what was left of it, she was 87, very comfortably. Here's another disaster, as it were, certainly for the two involved. August 1806, thunderstorm. During a thunderstorm, a poor man, a traveller with cloth for sale, and his son were struck down by lightning as they were standing in the doorway of a cottage at Low Wood, Haverthwaite. They had their horse killed on the spot, and the man and the boy felt a very painful sensation in their heads and were almost deprived of their hearing for a few hours. Much to the credit of the neighbouring gentleman, a subscription was set afoot to procure another pony for the poor man. I like this one, and it includes the place we're in now. August 1804, Backbarrow Mills apprentices. On Saturday and Sunday last, the Bishop of Carlisle confirmed at Ulverston 1,408 persons, 73 males and 678 females. A correspondent who was present on the occasion reports, amongst the great number of children present for confirmation were about 70 children belonging to the Back Barrow Cotton Company, orderly walking in a body, preceded by their master. The uniformity and decency of their dress, their healthy appearance, their modest and orderly demeanour attracted general notice and admiration. Indeed, to the credit of the Back Barrow Cotton Company, no gentlemen have paid more attention to the health, morals and education of their apprentices. I beg to differ. Those children had walked from Back Barrow to here, to this very building. They've been confirmed, and then they walked all the way back to Back Barrow, and then they would probably start a night shift of 12 hours. No wonder they were orderly and obedient. They'd probably be so tired they hardly knew what was going on. July 1821, Ulverston Parish Church. The coronation anthem was sung by the United Choirs of Soutergate Chapel and the parish church, in all 44 performers. Colonel Bradle of Conishead Priory was so pleased by the singers that he ordered all the ladies to go to Mr. Town's shop to fit themselves up with the best gloves in the shop. This is very curious. December 1808, freak kitten. About a fortnight ago, a cat belonging to Luke Dickinson of Ulverston brought forth a kitten which had 4 hind legs, 2 forelegs, and 2 more growing from its back. It had 2 tails, 1 head with 2 tongues, and a hare lip. It lived until Tuesday last. The owner has had it stuffed, and it has been viewed with astonishment by many people. Yes. This is one of my favourites. October 1856, Strange Things. Strange things come out to look at us from Plumpton Wood. The story is circulating that a black woman wearing a yellow silk dress with dagger has been seen to emerge from the wood in which she is supposed to dwell. On one occasion, she met with a child, but very much frightened the little girl who was carrying tea to her father working in the fields. Some fabulous accounts have been given of her agility in leaping walls and gates, and the stalwart workmen who live in the neighbourhood avoid the locality after dark, fearing to meet her. Brave men. February 1863, a curiosity. While Mr. William Jackson and his son were draining a field a few days ago on the farm of George Bolton at Rampside, they dug up a stone battle axe of great antiquity. We understand that a great many have been found in the neighbourhood. I wonder what happened to that battle axe. Perhaps it's in a museum in Barrow. June 1884, extraordinary discovery. Recently on view at the County Hotel, Ulverston, were several extraordinary bones discovered by Mr. George Cornthwaite of Sunbrick. The bones are of a prodigious size, one of them evidently being a backbone, having a vertebrae with star-like branches radiating from it. The remains are supposed to be those of some extinct colossal fish or reptile. Now, because my husband Morris is interested in railways, always has been since a child, I seem to collect more, perhaps, the normal railway stories, but there's one or two here that are quite interesting and how times have changed. August 1852, railway train derailed. Note the date, 1852. Ulverston station opened in 1857. So that's quite interesting because the railway hadn't quite got to Ulverston. However, it was being built. A narrow escape occurred on Monday when a train ran off the rails. The engine, which was returning from the Hillfall Bridge with empty ballast wagons, began to derail at the commencement of the cutting, which I think is Conishead Road. I think they mean Conishead Road. Of course, it wasn't there then. And embedded itself nearly a yard into the embankment. With the engine driver and the stoker was a child, and in the wagons 2 or 3 brakesmen. There was no injury to those who were with the train, except for a severe shaking. What was a child doing on the engine, I wonder? Every time I go over this bridge now, I think about this little snippet of information. March 1853, bridge collapse. The arch of the railway bridge spanning Dragley Beck Lane, which now of course is Victoria Road, from the Ulverston and Lancaster Railway, gave way yesterday, blocking up the highway. It was a flat arch of about 40 feet span, with brickwork in mortar and stone quoins. So when I drive under that now, I think, oh dear. Now, I like this particularly because it shows how things sort of get on. People got on with life then. They didn't wait for 3 weeks while some person came to inspect the rubble or whatever. It was just straight on with it. December 1856, railway landslip. The down train from Broughton met with an obstruction on Sunday night from a landslip in the Pennington cutting between Red Syke Bridge and the 3 Arch Bridge, which caused the engine and 3 carriages to run off the line, but fortunately without the slightest injury to anyone. A number of workmen who happened to be at Ulverston at the time worked incessantly to remove the fallen earth, and at 3 a.m. in the morning, the line was again clear for railway traffic. Now, I think probably it would have been shut for a week now, while there was people sort of sorting out why it happened. This is what I particularly like. October 1857, derailment at Cark. An accident occurred last Saturday near Cark Station. A passenger train was delayed by the engine running off the track at the points. The engine was overturned and blocked the tracks. A truck of cattle next to the engine was also overturned. The cattle alighted quietly and started to pasture on the grass by the track side. The engine driver and fireman were thrown off the engine, the fireman being severely scalded but progressing favourably. The passengers experienced a smart shock without, however, receiving injury. Every effort was made to help passengers continue their journey, and after a little delay, they were brought on to Ulverston Station. So once again, it would have been a week before that happened. I keep wanting to scratch my nose with my eyes, isn't it? January 1860, accident at the Canal Basin. An accident which might have been of a very melancholy character occurred to Mr. Alexander Brogden on Monday last. He was riding on a spirited horse by the canal bank when the horse sprang with its rider into the upper basin of the canal. Having reached the water, the animal made for the centre of the basin, and as Mr. Brogden is unable to swim, his position was very precarious. Fortunately, the captain of the ship, John Bull, and some of his crew lowered one of their boats, and Mr. Mr. Brogden and his horse were both happily saved. Now, the Victorians were great stuffers of things. They didn't think how pretty that white egret was or how sweet that blackbird's song was. They just shot them and stuffed them. Here's a couple of examples. October 1856, the rose-coloured ouzel, which I must admit is a bird I've never heard of, perhaps it's extinct because they've shot it to death. One of those very rare visitors to our islands, the rose-coloured ouzel, was shot at Beck by the son of Mr. Leonard Addison, farmer. The bird is an excellent specimen and may be seen at Mr. Kirby's bird stuffer in Market Street, Ulverston. November 1856, greater spotted woodpecker. An excellent and most beautiful specimen of this rare bird was shot last week at Nettleslack, near Broughton Beck. It is now at Mr. Kirby's taxidermist Ulverston for the purpose of being stuffed, where it may be seen by ornithologists and others curious in such matters. So who was Mr. Kirby? I found an advert which stated, James Kirby, barber and bird stuffer. 53 Market Street, Ulverston. And also he was an agent for the Allen line of Royal Mail steamers. And the little shop is still there, 53 Market Street. It's not a shop anymore, but it still retains its shop window. And when I was at work and was walking past it, I used to have a sly glance to see if the ghost of the rose-coloured ouzel was still there. January 1857, an accident to a lion tamer. Whilst Edmund's menagerie was on exhibition at Coniston, the lion tamer was putting a cage of lions through their performance when one of the beasts bit off the end of his right thumb. The wound was bandaged and the tamer carried on, although the bandage was saturated in blood, which we should have thought was dangerous to a degree. Later, Dr. Robinson of Ulverston amputated the thumb, and the lion tamer repeated his performance the following day. Mrs. Edmonds, the manager of the menagerie, will next appear in Ulverston, and on show will be real Yorkshire lions. The report goes on to say, which were born in Huddersfield a few days ago. November 1856, strange discovery of hams. And this relates to just outside there, about 50 feet beyond the wall. On Monday last, as Mr. Thomas Pennington, clerk of the parish church, was walking through the churchyard, he noticed a tombstone had been moved. An inspection resulted in the discovery of 4 fine bacon hams in a sack stowed away in the interior. The police later removed the hams before investigating the matter. The owner of them had lost them 10 days previously. So once again, when I'm walking through that churchyard, I look at the big tombs as I'm going past them and I think, was that the one the hams were in? Or was that the one the hams were in? We all like a ham and cheese sandwich, don't we? We have the ham, here's the cheese. January 1857, rather suspicious. On Sunday last, as one of our townsmen was returning home from the Gill, he stumbled over 2 large cheeses near the door of the town mill. The cheeses are, it is supposed, the product of a robbery and were hastily thrown away to avoid a passing policeman. They are now in the custody of the police and the owner advertised for in today's newspaper. So I looked for the advert, found it, and this is what it said. Found in the streets of Ulverston, 2 cheeses, which the owner may have by applying at the police office and paying the expenses of this advert. September 1858, shipwreck. The schooner Leaston Miller of Ulverston, under Captain John Anyon, on passage from South Wales to Ulverston, was driven onto Bardsey Island. That's not our Bardsey down the road, it's another island down towards Wales. Under high rocks and thought likely to become a total wreck. The captain and mate have met with a watery grave. The former has left a wife and a young family to mourn his loss, and the vessel was the property of Mr. Patrickson of Scales. And Mr. Patrickson was, of course, the miller at Gleaston. September 1883, vessel sunk off Bardsey Point. Now this time it was our Bardsey. On Thursday afternoon, during a heavy gale, a ship was seen to sink off Bardsey Point. It transpired that the vessel was a foreign bark, but beyond this, no further information was at hand. The crew at the time of the disaster took to the boats, and as they have not been seen or heard tell of, it is supposed they have all perished. Now, what I dislike about that little newspaper clipping is it didn't seem to matter. They got drowned. End of story. Lives didn't seem to matter much in those days. In March 1809, if we go back a few years, we had our own Mary Celeste story. Listen to this one. A sloop has been found at sea by a Liverpool fishing boat. It was laden with rum without any person being on board and full of water, about 4 miles to the west of Peel Island, and taken there. The name Mary of Plymouth is painted on her stern. So, how did the Mary of Plymouth become to be sailing without anybody on board near Peel Island? That is unanswered, sadly. Now, we're on the last page, and we've got to January 1903, and it's entitled The New Horse Ambulance. And it takes the form of a letter sent in by the Vicar of Fluteborough. Sir, I have just come in the new horse ambulance from Cark with 2 men to the cottage hospital in Ulverston, and wish to testify with gratitude the ease with which the new ambulance travels. The roads were heavy, 12 miles through rain, but we came with a smoothness no doubt appreciated by the patients who would have felt acutely any jolting. Signed John Fowler, Fluteborough Vicarage, January 26, 1903. I have to put the next one in because it's my favourite, and most of you have probably heard it before. April 1905, 3 cows in a chemist's shop. On Wednesday afternoon, 3 cows, which it is stated had just been imported from Ireland, I don't know whether that's significant or not, suddenly turned into the shop of Mr. Walton Porter, chemist. The scene inside can be better imagined than described. Once inside the shop, the infuriated animals did not use much discretion as to where they moved about, and before they could be driven out, the interior of the shop was the scene of chaos. I expect it would be. And also, in 1905, in Ulverston, there was 2 or 3 motor cars. And this is what the paper said about this surge of converted motor cars into the centre of Ulverston. Every day, the newspapers have to record an accident of some kind or another, owing to the reckless driving of motor cars. It is undoubted fact that some drivers career along with criminal recklessness, and when an accident occurs, they put on speed to get out of the way so that their number cannot be taken. The public must be protected. They didn't know they were born, did they? In 1905. There wouldn't be more than 3 cars in Ulverston. And to say that they were charging about recklessly, I'm sure any policeman would know exactly whose car that one was and whose that one was. So there we are. We've got to the end. 1905. We're still here, and we'll still be here in another decade, or another 100 years, or perhaps even 1,000 years, who knows. Thank you very much for listening.